Nolan, let's talk about a trial this week on a particularly heinous case that really shocked the community here. The Alton Nolen case, the man charged with beheading a worker at a Moore food facility. Jury selection this week and the trial got underway. What's happened so far?
Jury selection was actually completed last week, and they started opening statements, and they put on more than 20 witnesses the prosecution has. And you know what? People think of murder trials and they think of it like a mystery novel, that it's always a whodunit. But this isn't a whodunit. I mean, he was caught, shot at the plant. He confessed. Here's one transcript of his confession to the police and the FBI. The question at this trial is twofold. One, his defense attorneys are saying he is not guilty by reason of insanity, that he has a mental illness, that he thinks he's a Muslim and has twisted his reading of the Quran to believe that he was 100% right to try to behead the one woman and try to behead another because, as he told the FBI and more police, he felt oppressed by them. So the jury is being tasked not to decide whether he did it, but to decide whether he was insane. Now, if they find him insane, he won't go to prison. Instead, he'll go to the state mental facility in Veneta, where he'll be held possibly for the rest of his life. If they find him guilty and reject this defense, then there's a second stage, and prosecutors are asking for the death penalty. And his defense attorneys will fight that because of his mental issues that they say exist. So we'll see how it comes out. It's going to be a couple of weeks. Prosecution rested Wednesday, and the defense starts on Monday with experts, and it'll take probably next week till we have a verdict, if the juries can agree.
And we've had, for the first time, we're hearing from some of the people who were there that day as to what they encountered, and some of the victims are sort of for the first time sharing their stories. And some of the testimony has just been absolutely chilling in terms of what they were confronted with that day. Talk a little bit about some of the testimony and some of the things that the women described as happening that day.
Well, it was the most gripping moment was when the woman who survived, who had complained about remarks he'd made on a line, where basically an assembly line, a conveyor belt, and they're making bruschetta, and some of the ladies didn't think he was stirring it enough to keep the oil and all mixed up, and as they were dipping it into the jars and weighing it, and there was a little bit of an argument, and the one lady called him an immature brat, and he made a statement, which he admits to, that I beat on Caucasians. So she reports him. He gets suspended, and he goes home to his apartment, gets a knife, and comes back, and his target was going to be his supervisor, but he can't find his supervisor. So he goes and beheads the one woman, and we hear horrific testimony about how he kept going back to her, and as people tried to come in and fight him, kicked him in the head, and he finally accomplished what he was doing. And then he sees the second lady, her name's Tracy Johnson, and attacks her, and he's screaming the Arabic phrase, "God is great," as he's doing it, and he's sawing on her neck. She describes it as he was going at her like he was cutting a piece of meat. At that point, 3 or 4 or 5 men have come in. One of them is the company's operating officer at the time, and he's a reserve Oklahoma County Sheriff's deputy, and he has an AR-15 rifle, and he describes, yelling at the guy, and Nolan charging at him with the knife, and he shoots 3 times, and finally the guy stops and leans against the wall and slides down, and the lady who had complained about him is bleeding and has injuries to actually the right side of her neck, and but when she came into court, She it was the first time she'd been in a court setting with the defendant, because she didn't testify at the preliminary hearing, and she's clearly scared. The prosecutor, Susan Caswell, held her hand as she walked through the little swinging gate and up to the witness stand, which was a long way away from the defendant, but still, she kept looking over at him, and at one point she said, "This is rough, sorry, this is rough," and she described what happened to her, and the whole time, this defendant, who's not cooperating with his defense attorneys, because he wants the death penalty, or he said he did, and he's sitting over there with his fingers in his ears, his head down. Sometimes he does this, where he gets his, he doesn't have glasses on, where he gets his fingers and over his eyes too, and he nods a little bit, and sometimes, strangely, he has short sleeves and orange gel clothes on, and he takes his hands out of his sleeves and sticks them up through the hole in the top and does it like this, and it's a very odd sight. The very first day I was there for the opening statements, he had Kleenex against his nose was running, and he had stuffed them up each nostril, and they were sticking out. It's a strange setting.
It's a case that's just been shocking from the instant it began, and it continues to shock people. So he's done an outstanding job of covering it. Follow Nolan on Twitter. He provides live updates throughout the day on what's happening in the courtroom. It's a great way to follow that story. Of course, then you can pick up the paper and read all of our coverage every day on that case.